Years ago, I was involved in editing, writing, illustrating, recording the voices for English as a foreign language learning material. In fact, I did so with, I think, 10 different publication companies, including OUP and Macmillan and Longmans and others. I think partly because it was cheaper to record voices in Greece than elsewhere. And so I got to know the industry very well. At the same time, I was also teaching in classrooms, mostly in the evening, I think. And I went around some Greek schools. And I was appalled going into English classes that often the English teacher, the appointed English teacher, couldn't speak English. And in one or two schools, the English teacher hid, and I was taken around the school by the religious education teacher, and they seemed to think this would entertain me. It did. It entertained me greatly. But I was shocked by the state of play when it came to English education. And I remember there was one particular book, some of the local publishers loved putting out books under their name, and they could barely string a sentence together in English. But so those of us who were editing and writing these books had to submit to the indignity of having our name changed to sound Greek, or simply having our name erased from the credits altogether. And there was one book I remember, and the person who was in charge suddenly had this great idea and said to me, "Oh, we're going to put out a series of books called Getting By in English." And I remember the conversation vividly. I said, "But that gives the impression of barely succeeding." "Oh, do you not want to get by?" "I think many of our students would want to get by." "Oh, so you know better." And the conversation got quite tetchy. And I thought that there's a nuance in meaning which is often quite difficult for somebody of a second language to pick up in English. And I looked forward enormously to this series of books, Getting By. I thought, getting by in English, barely succeeding to string a sentence together. I can't cope in English. And it's always entertained me that there could be a series of books. It never happened, sadly, in the end, and nor was I involved in that one. So I think somebody else would have had a word with the publisher as well as I did, and eventually the sense set in, which is sad. But the reason I'm telling you this is that when it comes to educational change, somebody has said, well, we need more grammar schools. Let's have grammar schools again. No, we don't need more grammar schools. What we need is all schools to raise their standard. Because there is, in the end, only one standard, and that is excellence. You can't have a goal which is pitched at barely succeeding, getting by. Just failing in English. But you can't. And although it's laughable, that is the aim of a lot of teaching today. If you're lucky, you may get a D. What is the point of that? Your goal must be set on a top achievement. And therefore, we need to give every school the capability of behaving like a grammar school. And with internet access, it should be possible for a classroom teacher to manage students of varying capability, of varying standards in one class. Literally a comprehensive education with differing content to the lesson spread across the class, controlled by differing inputs from classroom information which is brought in. I see no problem with such a system. It's not about handouts, it's about content. And the content needs to be stimulating. Because a lot of the content, particularly in the handouts, is dull and boring. And David Davis said that one of the problems that he had when he was at school in physics was he was bored and he was reading novels during physics. Well, I know many students who are bored, and it manifests in many ways. And I remember in my recent experience of going into schools, looking around the classrooms and realizing there's one or two children playing with their phones because they're bored. And either it's the subject itself which is boring or not considered of worth, and a lot of the time I teach a subject which is very much in that category, religious studies. I think religious studies could be a dynamic and important lesson, but certainly the curriculum which is on offer is largely a waste of time. It's wallpaper. And yet, religious education would be a way to navigate the complexities of diversity, of integrating people into society, of spreading the word about how one person understands another. But our education is in a fix, and without a standard of excellence, that isn't going to change. Getting by is not enough.